I'm going to start with one that is an absolute no for me, and which I only have very rarely, and that is fizzy drinks. Any sweet sodas, just a total waste of time. Alcohol, if we're looking at skin, if you're really looking at like you want to look and feel your best, that I have nothing against. I love a good drink. I'm very open about that. But if I'm talking from a professional health question, the answer to the question is alcohol is not your friend in that situation either. Right. I hate to have to say. But I think alcohol, there is not a lot of great things you can say about alcohol from a physical point of view. But from an emotional point of view, and a community and a social and that structure and that support, then alcohol for many hundreds of years has been used in that situation. So I am not, if you like to have a drink with your friends and great, but if we're talking about how to do it your best, then you might want to sack it off for a bit.
Rosemary Ferguson, a big warm welcome to you, and thank you so much for appearing on the Your Body's Weight podcast. This is such a pleasure. We were just having a lovely discussion just now about how, first of all of your studies. We've been going through all of your studies, what kind of courses and your masters that you've taken recently, and we've been kind of going through that, but then also how you've been a huge inspiration to me on my nutritional therapy journey. So that's what the audience need to know. But how are you doing over there? How's the UK?
It's windy and wet and cloudy and grey, but otherwise it's fine. I'm trying to perk myself up with, look at the lovely autumn leaves, which really isn't cutting it, but the UK is fine. It's fine. I quite like it actually, but it's just a bit blustery today. Yeah,
for sure. So today I wanted to dive into none other than beauty, because obviously, you're a professional supermodel, from the 90s, and you're still modeling. So I thought it would be really fitting to cover beauty. So for example, skin, hair, nails, how we can glow from the outside, but more from a nutrition perspective and from a health perspective, because so many of us think, it's not the outside that counts, it's the inside. But then, come on, we all like to look good, we all like to feel good, we all like to be glowing, and we all like to age gracefully. So I thought it'd be a really great angle today to discuss like health, gut health, and how it kind of reflects on how we look. So that would be a great topic for today. But first of all, I just wanted to kind of go through for anybody who doesn't know who you are, I'm sure many people do who are listening. For anybody who doesn't, I just wanted to kind of introduce you and go through what you do. So first of all, a 90s supermodel. I mean, this can't be a model. It can't be kind of brushed over. That was a huge part of your career. But you're a turned nutritionist and you're a functional medicine practitioner. You have a central London clinic. You're an author, you're a podcaster, you're a writer for Vogue magazine, and you have the 5-Day Plan and Pure Filth, which are two kind of meal companies on the side, and you're a mother to 3 daughters. So my first question to you, Rosemary, is how do you balance all of these roles? Tell me.
Well, there's a couple of things there. One, my clinic now is all online, so that makes that much easier.
Okay,
so since COVID, I did actually post-COVID, I did go back and I had a clinic at the Lanzerhof in London. But actually, people are they're so used to this, they're so used to Zoom things now. So in the end, I was like, well, I might as well just make it simple. And if someone really, really, really wanted to see me, then we could do it at the Lanzerhof. But people are very used to it. So you're going to have to ignore the little dog barking in the background if you can hear it, because they're annoying sausage dogs. But yeah, how do I do it? I suppose I run around like a black blue ass fly most of the time, if I'm honest. I was going to say preparation and organization, but actually most of the time I'm flying by the seat of my pants, and it is, I have to breathe. I've really had to learn, because it's full on. And actually my girls are older now. So my youngest is nearly 17, one's 18 and the other's 24. So, so it's not the same as when I was first studying 15 years ago and they were all quite little. That was, and you've got a full-time job and you've got 3 little people. So but I suppose, do you know what? I suppose also the other things, I love what I do.
Yes.
And that's what we were talking about. So when you love what you do, and then I always want to find out more. It's a changing field all the time. I just wanted to, I think I had a bit of imposter syndrome. I knew that's why I did so much education. But, it motivates you when you love what you do. And I do. I love it.
And that's what I love about you. I love how you're so real about your experience. So, you just mentioned imposter syndrome, which, come on, all of us feel that at some point. I felt it many times myself, and I'm sure anybody listening feels the same. But then also when it comes to health and nutrition, I love how you're not just like, I eat perfectly all the time. You're very honest about the fact that, I enjoy treating myself. Like, come on, I mean, the holidays are coming, I'm just going to treat myself. And I just love that about you, about how you're real and so relatable. So I can imagine you get a lot of people coming to you for advice because of that, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I do. I get a lot of people. I also think, I tell you what really tempers any, I call it hyper health. And I like to go there. I like to go into that hyper health zone where it's just like single-minded, like, but I don't think I know it's not sustainable from clinical experience, but also mine. But I tell you what does really tempt me is having 3 girls, particularly girls. It's like you were a model, now you're a nutritionist and you've got 3 daughters. What are you going to do? What example are you going to set? How are you going to nurture their relationship with food so that isn't an issue, and that's what I think a lot of my philosophy around what I do and the way I work in clinic is about improving people's relationship with food, improving their confidence around food, because the psychology of eat less, you'll be better is wrong. It's just out and out wrong. So and from like a therapeutic point of view, if you can hit a sweet spot where it's sustainable, then people will stick to it. If you can't, if they feel restricted, they won't. It's just as simple as that. And so I don't have any rules really. I always put a plant-based, non-drinking. I'm like,
no, that's not me. And I think every other like health professional could say the same. Like, I mean, for myself, I would say I'm definitely not an angel when it comes to food. But that's the issue when it comes to like strict diets, when it comes to paleo and keto and all of those, like a very small handful of people can actually sustain it. But then when it comes to everybody else, it's, everybody needs to treat themselves every now and again and needs to feel that that's okay and it's normalized. So I think that's really important to represent, which you do, which I think is great. But what I'm interested in is, so obviously you've had a long career from modeling and into nutrition. And like you said, nutrition is something that you absolutely love. And it's almost like, I can imagine it's like playing. It's like, even though there's so much going on and you're juggling a lot of plates at the moment, I can imagine it's like play, What I'm interested to know is how has your approach to health changed? So, or has it changed at all? So back in your time as a model to how you are now, has there been any drastic change? Because, there's usually a kind of stigma around modeling and around the diets and the cigarettes and the Diet Coke. And how were you back then? And has there been any change?
So I definitely smoked a lot. I was such a happy smoker.
It was the time back then, wasn't it? Like that was when it was cool to smoke. Yeah.
Honestly, my kids can't believe that when I say you could smoke here, and there, they're like,
right.
Like, yeah. Okay, but it's great. I loved it. And I tell you something there, I do not miss it at all. But at the time, I was having a fine time. Food-wise, it's funny because I grew up in a very alternative medicine family. So my history is in my blood. My gran had a health food store. I grew up measuring out turmeric for people. And my mum is a kinesiologist. I grew up with homeopaths. And so, and my mum was always very balanced. The food we got was very, very just balanced food. So I didn't ever have my relationship with food. Well, no one's relationship, I think. So, so then when I was modeling, I think that the impact, I was talking about it the other day, is that I think it would be naive and not true to say that it doesn't affect your image, the image of your body, because so you are literally being looked at, and people will talk about you while you're standing there as if you're not there, or just as if you're, like a chair. So, and I had a really good experience when I modeled. Everyone, you know, I'd met some of my best friends doing it. I had a really lovely time. But I don't know if it made me careful, but what I used to do is I would drink quite a lot, and I'd go out, and what I'd do is then which I now call a mini binge purge, is then the next day I'd eat really, really healthy green juices before I did it all again the next night. So it was kind of that, you know, and I'd always say one extreme to another, and in there is balance. But actually there it isn't really balance. I mean, you're just doing one extreme to the other. But I suppose that also was one of the drivers as to what, you know, working out what would make me feel better and counteract the night before, was starting already to tinker with food and its impact on what it does to the body,
Right.
you know, at that age even. So and also the fashion industry is interesting because it is very aesthetically driven. So they want to look good, they want to feel good, but really they want to look good. So, you know, so there would always be the meals on set are always pretty healthy. They'd always be talking about the new fad. I mean, actually, I say healthy, but in New York, they were very healthy. In London, it was Marks and Spencer sandwiches and Coca-Cola and crisps.
Right.
But so it depends which city you're in. But in New York, they were very health focused, and it was very, you know. So I guess that informed some of my decision making later in life.
Right. And it's so good that you had the background from your family, because you know, that at least gave you the knowledge that you needed to then, you know, kind of bounce back after those days when, you know, you probably weren't as good with your nutrition, let's say. Coming to the topic of beauty and how our gut health affects that. So, like I said, we all want glowing skin, we all want bright eyes, we all want great hair. And so how does what we eat influence how we look?
Well, I mean, it influences everything. It's literally everything.
Right.
You know, it's sort of crazy that people still, and I'm going to say this about the medical profession, and they're going to hate me because I say it all the time, but it's crazy that the medical profession have still got this disconnect about what you eat and the importance of what you eat and how you feel, how your health behaves. But I think when we're talking specifically about skin, it's very, I mean, it's not just what you eat, as you know, it's what you absorb. But when you're putting things on the body, you know, if you're eating things that are inflammatory, then the body becomes inflamed, and then the face becomes, or your skin becomes inflamed. If you're, you know, for example, I mean, people call it liverish when you get a yellowy tinge. If you're drinking loads of booze, or you're putting loads of pressure onto the liver, eating loads and loads of sugar, or you know, processed food, ultra processed food, takeaway food all the time, eating too much crazy fat, then and I mean like trans fats, not crazy amounts of fat. I'm just talking about bad fats.
Yes.
Then you will see it in the skin because the body is feeling it. It's not because it's just like going, the skin, we're targeting the skin. The skin is a really good look at what's going on inside.
True.
So
yes.
That's one of the only things about virtual consultations are sometimes you can't. So when someone walks into your clinic, you can either get a vague idea of what's going on just by looking at them. I mean, you know, it's definitely not, I wouldn't leave it at that. I would never judge someone just on how they look, but you know, you can usually see if someone's tired. You can see if their skin is like not glowing. You can see if, you know, what the multitude of things, unless they've got it covers all sins as far as I can tell.
Are there any kind of telltale signs when you said looking tired? Do you look for anything else when it comes to the skin, or does anything else stand out to you in particular when you look at somebody's health from the outside?
Well, I suppose things like, you know, if someone's having lots of breakouts would be something where they're breaking out. Eye color, you mentioned, you know, if it's very yellow, the sclera, I can never say that, the white bit.
Sclera or something?
Yeah, that's how I said sclera. When it's looking a bit yellow, you know, but I mean, you'd have to, it's very rare, it's that bad, but you can sort of see when it's not bright. You know, then you can look at their tongue and all that stuff. But I'd say just from looking at somebody, if somebody has breakouts, where is it, how angry is it, what does it present like, is it dry, do they have dry skin, do they have, you know, rosacea type skin, do they have, you can sort of see quite a lot, I'd say.
So if just say someone comes in and let's start with skin, so just say they do have any of those things you just mentioned, so how does that relate to our health on the inside? So let's you know, what do you first of all think? Do you relate it to gut health? What do you relate it back to straight away? Like, what sort of goes through your mind, and what could be going on there for someone who might have, you know, any of those things that you just mentioned?
It depends. It's such a word. So if someone came in, for example, with let's talk about rosacea, because
Yes.
that's quite a simpler one. Acne is much more complicated. But if someone came in or eczema, but we'll start with rosacea. So if someone has rosacea, which is basically a flushed, like quite a red, hot looking cheeks. Usually it's here. It sometimes goes over the nose. You can get it all over the face, but I would, and if they came in to see me, I'm sure you're the same. It's very much about listening to what they want, but it would be a sign to me that there's some sort of inflammation in the body. So I would not be surprised if they said, well, my joints hurt a bit, or or they feel very stressed, or they get breathless, or they have terrible bowel movement, they get very bloated. I would not be surprised to hear any of those symptoms if I saw someone with quite a sort of pronounced red cheeks. Because basically, I suppose the thing that's going on inside is that when you have inflammation, which I know is just such a general term, but it's also a very right term, right?
Yeah.
It's a very correct term,
Right.
because if something is irritated in your body, the body produces an immune response, and that immune response will generate inflammation. And the reason you generate inflammation is because it's telling your body and your brain there is something wrong. Something's wrong. So when the best example of inflammation and how it works is if you fall over, you cut yourself. What happens is you bleed, obviously, but then it swells.
Yeah.
And then it swells because the body sends loads of soldiers to try and heal it, and that creates inflammation to protect you.
And that's how people recognize inflammation. Like when you talk about inflammation, they think of if they've hurt themselves, then obviously you get swelling. But what people don't realize is that you actually get that same thing on the inside as well. And that could be arguably the root of nearly every health issue that you have. But yeah,
it is, exactly. And you're absolutely right. And the thing is, it is a general term, but if you think about that's a very particular type of inflammation when it's on your finger. But then if you think about if your gut is inflamed, or if you have Crohn's, or you have diverticulitis, which are like ulcerative colitis is literally ulcer. There are lesions in the bowel, so then you're getting inflammation in the bowel, but that also has a spillover effect of just inflammatory markers all over the body. So it's something like eczema, for example, and this is really simplifying it, but if you have got a gut issue and you keep feeding it dairy, and you are really working with dairy very well, the body, every time you eat dairy, gets angry. And I'm talking about the body like it's a person, but it kind of is. It gets angry, and it's telling you it's angry, and it's telling you it doesn't like this, and it's telling you the gut doesn't like it, and it comes out as eczema. And that is a very simple way. But having said that, if you do have eczema, I would take dairy out first and foremost.
Yeah. I mean, like you said before, having a cluster of symptoms that you think are unrelated, there's a good chance that they are related. So like you said, so let's say if someone has headaches and they're constipated and they have bad skin and they're feeling low on energy, I think the important thing is to just look at all of your symptoms and to then think, okay, so how could these all be tied together? And that's when it's really good to get a nutrition or a functional medicine practitioner involved, because they're the people who understand that everything is linked. And just knowing that you have those symptoms and that it could be fixed by that you have the power to fix it. I think that's the best thing, because so many people think that, as we get older, these symptoms are inevitable. Like, oh, I've just had kids, like it's inevitable I'm going to be tired. It's inevitable that, I'm going to feel crap and, I'm going to start to go downhill from a certain age. But it's actually not the case. We can fix it. Like we have control over our health. And I think that's just the most empowering thing. And that's where obviously lifestyle comes into it, obviously how much sleep you get, how much exercise you get, and how little or how much stress you're going through. But food has a massive impact on your symptoms, and it's really good for people to know that. So when it comes to like the core of health, I mean, the famous saying Hippocrates that all disease begins in the gut. I thought it'd be really good to kind of visit the gut with you and to discuss it and kind of help people get to know the gut, because there's enough information out there now. People know that, the gut, gut health is really important. You have this, bacteria in your gut, and you need to, keep them healthy through what you eat and what you do. But I just thought we could kind of go into the gut. What is in the gut? How does food affect it? And how that can then lead to, good, like, let's say, like feeling and looking beautiful or not. So can you just tell us a little bit about the gut and what we need to know when it comes to our health?
The gut, I mean, the gut is everything from your mouth all the way down to your anus. It's the whole
Right.
thing.
That's it. Yeah.
And so it's important to, I mean, it's an incredible, I mean, the whole body is incredible. It blows my mind all the time, the way,
Yeah.
it keeps us safe and healthy, and it's always looking out for you. It's always trying to keep you in balance, even if you're pushing it all the time to be out of balance. But I suppose the gut, I don't know, there's so much you could cover on the gut.
But there's so much to, like, where do you even start when it comes to the gut? So what about the gut microbiome?
Okay, so the microbiome. Well, the microbiome, we have biomes all over, bacterial colonies. We know there's one on the skin. We know there's one in the vaginal microbiome. We know there's one in the mouth, which arguably could be the microbiome because it's part of the alimentary canal. But the microbiome is a collection of bacteria, is a bacterial colony that we have in our gut. It's unique, 150,000% unique to you. And it is it's where most of our immune system comes from. It's what helps us to create good mood. Hormone serotonin, most of our serotonin comes from the gut. And basically it's just a colony of little bacteria. So if you think about, so this blew my mind when I heard this. So we are more bacteria than we are human.
Right.
We're 55% bacteria, which I just always think it's such a great thing. You're like, so if we had no bacteria, we would literally be less than half ourselves. So and
they also govern, like, so because there's so much of them in comparison to us, they also govern like our emotions and what we do and our drives, and that they're in charge more than anyone could ever imagine, and that blows my mind. But
also, there's arguments saying when people talk about cravings, that is also, you give the gut sugar and the gut goes out of whack, and then the body releases insulin to deal with that sugar, and then you go low in sugar, and then you're going, we need more sugar. So it's like this, but basically the bacteria that live in our gut, which do rule us, if you think of them like little people working away, if you feed them crap, then the good ones don't thrive, the bad ones thrive. And if you feed it well with lots of lovely fiber, loads of plant foods, just variety, actually, even meat, protein helps, everything helps, but as long as it's variety. I'm not a massive proponent of really hardcore keto and carnivore. I am a big fan of lots of plants in there, and we know that lots of plants are really amazing for the bacteria in our gut because they're high in fiber. So really, when you think about the gut, you think that we want to eat, I don't know, like broccoli, because we do, and the bacteria want to eat the fiber in that broccoli. And so when you eat that stuff, they go crazy, very happy, and then they do good things for us. I mean, that's like, I always think of them a bit like a cartoon, actually. Like, it's, when you give them lentils and people go, can't eat lentils, I bloat. I'm like, that's because the bacteria in your gut are going absolutely crazy because they love it. They're like, woohoo. And if you actually stuck with lentils for a bit, they would calm down.
Really?
Yeah, they would.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so it's, well, in most cases, unless there is an imbalance, or but usually if you stick with it for 3 weeks. Also, the other thing is, if you go from eating burgers every day to suddenly a high fiber diet, it's not going to go well. So build up slowly. But yes, your bacteria will get used to having legumes, and it will calm down.
So when you say, so that's really interesting, let's kind of hover on that for a bit. So when you say that someone has lentils and they bloat, you say that's a good sign. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it shows that the bacteria, because it's basically the bacteria are releasing metabolites, so they're digesting the fiber, and then they too, in the same way that we release metabolites, whether that's gas or they break it down and they make it useful. We break it down to make it useful. They break it even further down to make it useful to us, but they do produce gas. They produce, I'm trying to think of the word, metabolize is the only word I can think of, and that probably doesn't make sense to everyone, but they produce bits from the process of breaking them down, and those can be gas.
Wow, I did not know that. Wow, so I'll keep that in
Well,
mind.
it's like actually,
Yeah.
so it's also like vitamin K. So we get most of our vitamin K from bacteria breaking down. We don't get our vitamin K. Vitamin K comes actually from the, I mean, it's so funny because when you think about bacteria as little bits of protein, so when they when they break down, we get the vitamin K from them. So it's kind of, it's very symbiotic, this relationship we have with our bacteria.
And also, I love the idea of to really help the bacteria kind of thrive, because obviously the optimal health can be related to the diversity of your gut. So I'm sure you've heard that people who live in kind of more kind of local tribes, or, you know, people who don't eat a typical westernized diet, they have a typical kind of more varied gut microbiome, which is why possibly they don't have as much disease as we do. So variation is key. So in your diet, if you can give your bacteria as much variation as possible, like all of the colors of the rainbow and, you know, all different types of foods, then that can encourage variation in the bacteria as well, which is a good thing. Like, that's the aim, that's the goal. I had this incredible guest, Sandor Katz, the wild fermentation guy.
I was going to say ferment. Yes, amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
He gave a fabulous podcast about fermented food. And when you say that bacteria is unique to each of us, it's really interesting, and it kind of triggered this memory from what we were discussing before with Sandor Katz. So basically, when obviously kimchi is one of the, you know, one of the most famous fermented foods, and the Koreans are sort of known for being so healthy. And could it be because of all the fermented kimchi that they have? Like, that's the thing. But basically, when there was an experiment done that when this lady, when she made kimchi, the bacteria that grew on the kimchi, they could actually test the bacteria, and it was the same bacteria that was on her hands. So basically, whoever made that, when you say symbiotic, it's so symbiotic because you know, if someone actually touches the fermented foods, the bacteria from their body actually starts to grow, like in the food. It was really, really interesting. Yeah.
What, that's so cool. I mean, ferments are so unbelievably powerful. And actually, when people talk about probiotics, which I use probiotics in clinic, yes, I do. But the for someone moving on from a course of probiotics, using ferments every day, a tablespoon, whatever, is one of the best ways to build up your own microbiome. Because as I said, it's so unique. You've got thousands of bacteria, no one's got the same. And so feeding it with ferments, it encourages your personal microbiome to thrive.
Yeah, because I've heard that, like you said, like a teaspoon or a tablespoon a day is great. But then even kind of working yourself up to that, like up to a cup, I've heard, like even going up to a cup, if your gut can handle it, like, because, you know, like you said, diving into it straight away, like a cup a day, your bacteria need time, like they need time to kind of figure it out.
And and I think it's the same with anything. People want to do it faster because faster is better, faster or more is better. And actually, it's not always the case.
Yeah.
Not always the case at all.
Yeah. So if our gut is, like you said, inflamed, if the gut bacteria are unhappy, the bad ones are thriving, the good ones, you know, are kind of struggling a little bit, then it kind of goes to show, you know, that that will reflect in the rest of our body and the rest of our health. So, and that includes like the outside, like how you look and feel from the outside. So can I ask then, you've already kind of mentioned it a little bit, but are there any foods or drinks that we should absolutely be avoiding when it comes to beauty? Like if someone said, oh, I want to look and feel my best, like what would you say? What would you say? No, do not have this. Like only a little bit though. Like, so we know we like to treat ourselves.
I'm going to start with one that is an absolute no for me, and which I only have very rarely, and that is fizzy drinks. Any sweet sodas, I just have I have nothing to say about them every now and then. So soda, I think soda is just a total waste of time. Alcohol, if we're looking at skin, if you're really looking at like you want to look and feel your best, that I have nothing against. I love a good drink. I'm very open about that. But if I'm talking from a professional health question, the answer to the question is alcohol is not your friend in that situation either. I hate to have to say. So what I suppose you could do is like avoid alcohol till whenever you want to look great, and then when you look great, go and But I think
that's good advice. I like that.
Well, it's probably not. It's like encouraging binge drinking. But I think alcohol, there is not a lot of great things you can say about alcohol from a physical point of view, but from an emotional point of view and a community and a social and that structure and that support, then alcohol for many hundreds of years has been used in that situation. So I am not, if you like to have a drink with your friends and great, but if we're talking about how to do it your best, then you might want to sack it off for a bit.
Yeah. And that's a really good point about how, the social aspect is really important. I think, socially, I would agree. Like, I wouldn't tell anyone to avoid it completely, because the social aspect, I would just say, with anything, just don't overdo it. And I'd say that would be pretty similar with most things, including sugar as well. So I'm a sugar fiend. Like, I need to have my chocolate every night after dinner still. I can't shake that. I can't shake that habit. It's really weird. But
that's
sugar,
okay though, isn't it? That's all right. A little bit of chocolate. I mean, I think the thing is, if you don't sort of acknowledge that, then what happens is you end up rebounding and going and eating a whole box of celebrations. So it's actually making that decision. You choose it, don't let it choose you. So you say, actually, I'm going to have that bit of chocolate, and then it's not going to come back and bite me on the bum. And so, and I think that's really part of empowering yourself and going, actually, that's what I want to do, and that is my choice, and I am making it my choice, because if I don't make it my choice, it will choose me, and I will not be in control of it.
Yeah. And that's why in this case, like, knowledge is power, like knowing that these foods and drinks, they're not the best thing for your health. But being able to choose it, and just know your information about it. So in that case, are there any go-to foods that you can't live without in your diet and that you would recommend for other people?
Well, I am do you know what, it's so funny, because I'm sure you're the same. You don't realize how healthy I suppose you are. So I'm always like, but I suppose like I always have, and I love pulses. I love them. So I love those. I love hummus. I love eggs. I actually just love food.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean though, or do you mean what's my naughtiness?
No, just foods that you would recommend for gut health. I mean, you've already kind of said like a variation, like, as much variation as possible.
As much variation as possible. I think probably if your gut is playing up, it doesn't really matter what you eat. If you have digestive symptoms like you're fluctuating from very loose to very hard bowel movements, you're not fully evacuating your bowel, you have bloating, gas, any pain, anything, then it's possible that your gut, it's probable that your gut isn't functioning as it should be. And then that might mean that you're not absorbing. So it might mean that it doesn't matter what you're eating, you're not absorbing it. In which case, I think things like digestive enzymes can be really helpful to take before you eat. But also something as simple as apple cider vinegar can be really useful. So
the stomach acid, right?
The stomach acid. And also things like eating bitters. So things like arugula and rocket and endive are really good for stimulating the bile. And the bile helps break down fat. There are lots of things. I think if you're really unsure if if you think your digestion is not working, it is worth going to see someone to get it sorted, because you'll feel so much better when it works properly.
Yeah. And are there any kind of go-to tests that you like to use for people if they come to you with gut issues?
So the stool test is one of my most used tests. I use the Genova lab. I use GI Effect. Pretty much exclusively. And that test is, if someone said which one test would you say gives you the most information about someone, it would be that, because it shows how your fat's breaking down, it shows how your proteins breaking down, it shows me how if you're making short-chain fatty acids, postbiotics, it shows if there's inflammatory markers. It's, you can get much more than just the bacterial colony with the GI effect. So I use that quite a lot. And I suppose the other thing is, SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. I might do a breath test for that because that's quite easy to do.
Yeah.
So I do that from time to time. But yeah, just the Genova GI effects is the one that I use. It's a 3-day affair, which people are not so thrilled about, but it's very comprehensive and really shows you a lot.
Right. I agree. I think that test is probably one of the best ones when it comes to reflecting your gut health and kind of understanding what's going on with your gut bacteria. I know that you know quite a bit about fasting. So how does fasting, so when it comes to food, we've kind of discussed what sort of foods are good for the gut, what sort of foods aren't so great. But when it comes to food timing, are there any recommendations you have regarding fasting and how that can help the gut?
There are a few. So fasting, or if we're talking about time restricted eating, like where we shorten the eating window on a daily basis, I think that what the science shows is that anything from 8 hours to 12 hours of an eating window is a nice rest for the gut. So having 12 hours off, a clear 12 hours, and I really do mean 12 hours. I don't mean that you can have a little cup of tea with milk in it or a cheeky glass of wine. It is 12 hours off. So you can have water, and actually herbal tea. I always say herbal tea, but I've amended that because I don't mean sweet herbal tea. I mean, because sweet herbal tea, the taste stimulates an insulin response, even though you're not eating sugar.
Interesting.
It's the brain just goes, ding, there's that taste, we'll produce a bit of insulin, which
the whole point of fasting is to keep the insulin levels down.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Like anything that stimulates insulin,
we just don't want. So that's the whole point. I mean, because fasting actually traditionally is nothing to do with an insulin response. But now when we talk about time restricted eating or fasting, time restricted eating in particular, or intermittent fasting, is to do with this, trying to get the blood glucose and the insulin more sensitive. And for the microbes and for the microbiome, in answer to your question, it is really beneficial for it to rest, for the bacterial colony to get a break from, because I also, particularly in the UK and the USA, in the US and the UK, snacking culture is massive. And it is so particular to those two countries. So in Europe, nowhere else in Europe snacks like the UK does. And in America, it's, so what happens is the microbiome is working all day long. It's constantly getting food. And it's exhausting. We spend half our energy every day anyway digesting food, and then you're feeding it all the time. And that's where this insulin issue comes, because you're having to produce insulin all day long. So when we take a break or reduce that window that we're eating, it gives the microbes a rest. And so you will get better cognition, you will have better I can hear what I was going to say. You will have better cognition, you will have better digestive issues, the digestive symptoms will be improved. So yeah, all in all, yeah.
And like you said about snacking, it's crazy because snacking is actually encouraged. So a lot of the big food companies are putting ads out there as basically saying that we need to keep eating, we need to keep our blood sugars up, we need to keep our energy going, and if we don't keep snacking, then our energy will fall somehow, almost like our body kind of relies on these snack foods to kind of stay alive and to stay healthy. And it's very clever marketing, because for most of my life I believed that snacking was you needed to graze, you needed to snack. It's only since I obviously went down this nutrition route that I actually know that actually your body does very well with a break, and you can actually get a lot of benefits. And they, like you said, the bacteria, they appreciate that rest from food.
Yeah, but also though, when you look at the idea of snacking and the rate of obesity, this constant, there is a case, if somebody had very specific hypoglycemia, like very low blood sugar, there is a case then that you would want to perhaps have smaller meals. or in the young. If you're working with a 20-year-old who's very active, or a 17-year-old, then the younger you are, the more likely it is that your metabolism and your insulin response is on point, and you may definitely could do with like a mid-afternoon something. There is also an argument, or not an argument, there is the evidence suggests that if you've got thyroid issues, reducing that eating window to 8 hours probably isn't good for you. Keep it at 12. And then the same for somebody who is extremely stressed. So the thing about alpha people are that they tend to be, I want to do yoga, I'm going to work out, I'm going to do this and this, I'm only going to eat for 3 hours a day.
That's me. I just put my hand up. I was like, that's me. That's what I deal with every day.
So that's the sort of person who's like, it's fine, I can do this restricted eating, and I can do it, but the problem is that you're adding stress onto stress. So actually you want to, so that's when a 12-hour framework, it's really, really successful and sustainable. But as you say, the thing about this grazing all day is that you never have what we call a complete meal. So you are hungry throughout the day, because what you're doing is you're snacking, and so then you're like at lunchtime you're a bit like, oh, just have a little something because I snacked, so I'm going to only have something little. And then at 3 o'clock in the afternoon you're hungry, so you have something probably not so great. And then dinner time you're like, oh, I had a snack, so I'm not going to eat very much now. So it's another tiny little binge purgy type yo-yo throughout the day. So yeah.
Are you a fan of breakfast? Because I know that a lot of people, there's a lot of mixed messages out there about what we should be eating in the morning, whether we should be having breakfast, or whether we should be skipping it. So what do you usually find yourself recommending to people?
It's very personal. So some people are not very good with breakfast. I think the thing about intermittent fasting is that it's not about skipping a meal. It is nothing to do with the quantity or quality of what you eat. It is to do with letting your body have a rest. That is all it's to do with. And actually eating breakfast, according to circadian rhythm, the science that's coming out about that is earlier in the day. Eating earlier in the day is much better for us. It's better for our sleep. It means your peripheral circadian rhythm, so your organs, get what they need first thing in the morning. It's when they're most active. So, but for a lot of people, it just doesn't fit lifestyle wise. People have families, or they want to go out for dinner. And so shifting the window later in the day suits many people. But the great thing about it is it is flexible. But I think if you can eat from a health point of view, eating earlier in the day is better. But from a sociological point of view, it seems to be that eating later in the day, like moving that window later, works better. And let's face it, it is really important. That stuff is really important for our health, and it really, like, for our physical health as well. It's not just like, oh, I need to have my social time.
I mean, it's so personal, as you said, but I think what's really useful for people is having that gap between dinner and bedtime. So maybe a couple of hours where they don't eat. I think going to bed on a full stomach is basically not a good idea. I think we've all done it, and your sleep quality is just not as good. And if your sleep quality isn't as good, then that just impacts your whole body. So I think that's when shifting your eating window a bit earlier in the day, and being conscious of that, that's when it's a positive thing, because that kind of loosens up some time at the end of the day. So I've just got a couple more questions. First question is about caffeine, because for example, caffeine is encouraged during a fast, let's say, but then overall, coffee is seen as, let's say coffee is seen as like some people say it's really good for you, and other people say that you shouldn't be having it. So I was curious, when it comes to your gut, and therefore how you look on the outside, how does caffeine play into things for you? Do you find yourself recommending it, or do you tell people to steer clear? Or again, is it individual?
I think so. We know that 1 coffee a day is good for the microbiome. The microbiome loves it. It's got some lovely antioxidants in it. It's got some lovely polyphenols in it. So it's great. The problem with caffeine comes when people use it to stimulate their adrenal glands. So when they're tired in the afternoon, and their body's telling them they're tired, and they have a coffee, so that synthetically stimulates the adrenal glands, which are telling you they're tired. So that is when people who drink 7 cups of coffee a day to stay awake, that's where caffeine is not beneficial. But the polyphenol status of coffee is good for the gut. So one a day, I think. It's funny because I used to take people off coffee all the time, and honestly, the headaches that people go through is so torturous for them.
So torturous, and they last all day. They don't go away. Yeah.
And so unless someone wants to come off coffee, and unless someone wants to actually stop coffee, then I've stopped doing that, because I just don't see the point. I think, we know one a day is good for you. So I think, so I don't do that anymore.
I think it's
counterproductive. People are feeling awful when you're trying to make them feel better. It's like, well, you're going to go back to coffee anyway, so we might as well just keep you on it.
Exactly. And also some people tolerate caffeine very, very well, and they can have a coffee and they can just feel good, but they don't change, like they don't feel any different. But then you do have some people who can actually get the jitters and can get quite negative side effects. So I'd also say in that case, like maybe a caffeine doesn't quite agree with you. So it's like,
I don't drink coffee, and people think it's because of my job. And I'm like, it's not because of my job, it's because it makes me shake so much. I can drink matcha and green tea, but then they have L-theanine in it. So, and it's a different process, but I cannot. So when people say that, I'm like, why do you do it? It doesn't make any sense to me. I'm like, well, you're an idiot. So if it makes you feel that bad, don't drink it. But and then there are lots of people who try and hack it with using theanine, which might help, but there are different caffeines you can try.
Yeah. And also just for myself, when it comes to caffeine, I've been fine with it my whole life. But then since I had kids, this must be a hormonal shift that happened within, because after I had kids, I was getting very dizzy in the afternoons, like as in sometimes feeling like I was going to pass out, like it was very intense dizziness. And I was like, what's going on? And in the meantime, every morning I was having like a cafetiere of coffee, but I didn't make that connection because I've always been okay with caffeine my whole life. But I was like, what's going on? Oh, it must be the kids, it must be hormones or whatever. But then one day I thought, let me just look at this cafetiere that I'm drinking and let me just take that out and see what happens. And I literally, like day and night, the dizziness went away completely. And I was like, oh my God. So, and now even if I just have a cup of caffeinated coffee, it can send me on this dizzy kind of spell for the whole day. So that, I guess my message is to anyone listening is what was true for you before is probably not true for you now. Like we change all the time, and just go with the flow, just go with it and listen to your body. I just wanted to know about your go-to supplements when it comes to health and vitality and everything. So what would you recommend?
It changes, as you can imagine. I'm always tinkering around with supplements. My go-to, well, I can tell you brands that are my go-to, because
that'd be really helpful.
So Quicksilver Scientific, which is an American brand, I love, and I use their glutathione a lot. I've run out of it at the moment. I also like they've got one called The One, which I love. I love the boldness of that.
I love that. It's like, take
The
this.
One. And it is bloody great. So that's a very adaptogenic tincture. I love that. I love the combinations that company puts together. I use minerals, electrolytes from a company called Designs for Health.
I love that brand. Same.
Yeah, they're an amazing brand too. I tell you what I am taking at the moment, which I've been taking for a while, is Lyma, Lyma. It's a subscription one in the UK. They ship everywhere, but it's a multi basically, and I do quite like that. And then the other one that I take, which is a bit more niche at the moment, is Urolithin A by Timeline Nutrient. Timeline is a mitochondria support. So I'm taking
more energy, I suppose, like to boost energy, and like it's good for that.
It's just good for, and it's also like an anti-aging kind of. It's a mitochondrial protection, I suppose. So I've been taking that, and I quite like that. And then I've started taking vitamin D because it's like it is outside.
Yes,
it's basically dark at whatever time it is. So yes, I'm taking vitamin D now. But I do change them. So someone said the other day, do you take a probiotic? I don't take a probiotic very often, but I will do it once a year.
Right.
I guess I spend most of my time feeding that microbiome. So once a year, it is good to take a probiotic once a year, probably, or twice, even depending if you've had antibiotics if you're very stressed, if you're in polluted waters.
Yes, yeah, love it. Well, that's really, really great advice. And I think overall this conversation has been really great. And I think anybody listening definitely has some takeaways, like some general kind of like, okay, so if my gut's not feeling great, then that's probably why I'm getting the symptoms I'm getting, and therefore, these are some steps I can take to fix that. So I just wanted to say a big, big thank you, Rose, for coming onto this podcast. It was so much fun. Where can people find you? I mean, people can find you anywhere, I'm sure, but where do you prefer people to find you?
Well, I suppose, so my website is roseferguson.com and my Instagram is Rosemary Ferguson _ and that's, I suppose, the two places where I dwell most of the time.
Lovely. All right, well, I'll let you go, but thank you so much. This was fabulous. Thank you so much.
Lovely to see you, and thank you so much for having me.